The Honourable Member for Western Arctic.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to speak on Bill C-19, an act to eliminate the long gun registry in Canada. Under Canadian federal law, this registry will cease to exist after potentially this week, and after the Senate, of course, has its chance to deal with. But I think it's pretty clear now, Mr. Speaker, that the Senate will deal with it in a very prompt fashion. I represent a riding where firearms are very important, where firearms for many people represent a necessity for subsistence living, where firearms represent a cultural way of life, where firearms are used extensively and in 99.9% of the time for the correct purposes, for hunting and for trapping and for carrying on a outdoor lifestyle. So when the gun registry was introduced years ago, there was very strong opposition to it. But there was strong opposition as well to the licensing provisions, to the educational provisions, to the safe storage provisions. There was a general feeling that gun owners, people that use their guns for legitimate purposes, were being hard done by. And I agreed with that. I agreed with the Fort McPherson elder that told me he didn't want to become a criminal because he was continuing to do what he'd done before. And I agreed with that. We shouldn't make criminals in Canada out of respectable citizens. We should do everything we can to avoid giving Canadians criminal records for issues that are not that important, that are not issues that are issues that may be bureaucratic, may be simply people unable to register a gun, people unable to store it properly, dealing in families, all these different issues that surround the use of any kind of implement. So I was always in favor of getting the criminal record, the criminal charges out of the long gun registry. But even in 2000, Mr. Speaker, I said there is a value to any registry, whether you register dogs, whether you register cars, whatever you register has a value to the person registering it. That person has security in that their possession is filed in an appropriate fashion with an authority that can direct attention to whether that particular instrument, whether it be a car or a dog or a gun, has been mislaid, has been stolen, has been used by someone else in an inappropriate fashion. So a registry is a useful tool for those people that want security with their possessions. And, Mr. Speaker, over the last 4 months, since my constituents have heard the argument about the data, the gun owners are starting to wake up to the fact that there is a reason why they want their guns registered. There is a reason why a law-abiding citizen would like to know that his gun is identified in a legal registry so that if it is stolen, if it is misplaced, if it is mishandled by someone else, that that gun will not be put under his name, that that gun will be recognized for what it is. If that gun is sold to someone else, that legal gun owner has a way of tracking that record. So they're coming to me with that issue. But, Mr. Speaker, I came to this government in June and said, what are you going to do with the data? When you propose to take long guns out of the criminal registry, is what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing. What are you going to do with the data that you have collected, that people have invested in giving to the government? Because that's what people do when they register their implements. They invest their time, their effort, and their thought in putting it into a registry. What are you going to provide for those people that want a registry? Well, perhaps then now it falls in the hands of provinces, territories, municipalities, whatever government agency decides that they want to provide the registry for guns. Well, that makes sense, and we've got a great example of that right now with Quebec. Quebec has said, yes, we want to provide a registry. Under our laws, there will be no criminality with a registry. There can't be. The criminal code is driven by the federal government. It's driven by this parliament, not by the Quebec parliament. So when the Quebec government establishes a registry, which its citizens can partake in, they will have the opportunity to do what they want to do with it. And that is the way of this land. That is the way the law works in this land. That is the way we take care of things in our land. Provinces register cars. Municipalities register dogs. So we have a process of registration at a provincial or territorial level. And since 2000, Mr. Speaker, I have been an advocate of a provincial type registry, because I can see that there are more purposes to a registry than establishing criminality. There are much more purposes to a registry than that. Under the existing criminal code, we still have safe storage. So it's still going to be a criminal offense if you don't store your gun safely. But within the existing criminal code, I'm having trouble establishing what is considered ownership once we remove the registry. How do we determine what ownership is when we've taken the registry, the legal registry of guns, out of there? How do we say, this is your gun, this is your gun, you didn't store this one properly, you're going to get a criminal record. Oh, you didn't store that one, that's not my gun. Well, it's in your house, it's your gun. Is that the way it's going to be? Did this Conservative government do any work on this legislation? You know, when they first started talking about the data, Mr. Speaker, they said, and it was ministers of this government that said, oh, we can't share this information, that goes against the Privacy Act. Well, did it go against the Privacy Act? Is that what the Privacy Commissioner said? The Privacy Commissioner said no. So all of a sudden the government changed its tune. It changed its tune. It said, oh, now it's ineffective and inefficient, it doesn't work, it's not correct, it wasn't made up right. That's the direction they went into. This government doesn't do legislation very well, does it, Mr. Speaker? When it doesn't have the answers to start with. I can take your opinion as well. It doesn't do legislation. It is terrible. This government isn't fit to legislate. And that is the case with this bill. They have not looked at the issues. There is no document that shows us how the interaction of the criminal code works in the case when we remove the registry with the other elements. Show me a document, show me any information that's been shared with these members of Parliament in this House on that issue. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to this bill, I supported the member for Portage-Lisker's bill because it was a blunt instrument, but it was what my constituents wanted, and I didn't see that it was in the shape that this one is. This bill is a mess. They haven't done a job with it. They're reacting. They're not doing it correctly. They've left out many important elements, and we pointed them out through many amendments. And this government's chosen not to listen to any of it. What does that give us from a government? A government that doesn't listen, a government that doesn't want to do things right, a government that doesn't want to do its homework. What have we got here? We've got a government that acts emotionally and without regard for due process of legislation. Mr. Speaker, this government is not getting any more approbation from me on their legislation. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the member opposite, with all due respect, when the Liberals introduced this bill back in 1995, the basis of their argument was this gun registry will save lives and stop the criminal use of firearms. That's what they told us. Mr. Speaker, we've now got 16, 17 years of experience with this bill. The member wondered how we can introduce this bill because we don't have we've got 16 years of experience with this bill. We've seen the wasteful spending, we've seen how ineffective it is, and we know that there's not one credible piece of evidence or fact that shows that this firearm registry saved a life or cut the criminal use of firearms. Not one, Mr. Speaker, and the opposition in all this debate has not been able to present one single fact. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Western Arctic.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that was not the subject of my discourse. My discourse spoke to what is going to happen with the data and why this government has done what it's done. Provinces and territories can make up their own minds whether this is effective, whether a registry is effective for them, and this government is involved in a federation, and that means a cooperative federation. So what we see here is a non-cooperative government in a federation, and that's a disgrace.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Yukon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess the member from Western Arctic has now made it very clear where he's going to stand in this position, despite what he knows to be the interest of his constituents. And I guess that's a question he'll have to rectify with the great people of the Northwest Territories. But when he talks about putting forward amendments that we weren't ready to listen to, he needs to include and tell the people of the Northwest Territories that one of the amendments that the NDP put forward was an amendment to change the short title of the bill to something that's absolutely ludicrous. It's just a mockery of what we are attempting to do here. And if he wants to stand behind that as a credible and legitimate amendment, I'd like him to do that for his people. And when he talks about not being able to track guns through safe storage, I can remind the member and ask him if he knows that there is far more to policing and investigation than just sitting behind a computer. Let's put police on the streets. Let's get them doing good old-fashioned police work. And I can tell you right now, police officers do not want to be solving crimes sitting behind a computer. And that's what that member's answer is to maintaining this registry, is creating data-chasing police.
Honourable member for Western Arctic.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with all humility to my colleague from my neighboring territory, who I also feel very much sympathetic with in many issues, he brought the one example forward that's more about form than substance. I mean, title of a bill. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in the title of a bill. I'm interested in the substance of the legislation that is going to destroy billions of dollars worth of data that provinces might want, that his territory might want. We put forward an amendment that would give a specific time frame to the provinces to consider whether they wanted that data. And that amendment was not accepted by the Conservative Party, by the Conservative government, because they're not interested in substance, they're interested in form. And they've used this issue of the gun registry as form for many, many years to fundraise, to harangue other MPs. That's what they do. What is that legislation? Is that attention to detail for Canadians? No, it isn't. And that's the problem we have here in this House.
Time for a short question and response. The honourable member for Surrey North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleagues from Western Arctic for giving out a very, very thoughtful speech this afternoon. You know, I've been hearing rhetoric from the Conservatives, rhetoric that doesn't make sense at all. We've heard from chiefs of police, we've heard from the Canadian, many other chiefs around this country, and they do not want to abolish this gun registry. And I was wondering if the member can comment on that.
The honourable member for Western Arctic, a short response, please.
Well, my position has always been that this should not be a criminal matter, the registering of firearms. That is correct. The police need tools. The gun owners need tools. A gun owner who loses his rifle and wants to say, I'm not responsible for that rifle anymore, can go to a registry and say, this rifle has been stolen, this rifle with this serial number is no longer my rifle. Without a registry, what can he do? Stuck with it.